To make this work. Turns out it is a bug in SwiftUI. Or at least it very much looks to be like a bug in SwiftUI. So this is what we had before, a scroll view with a for each inside of it that's trying to reload and nothing would happen. If I just come back here and change scroll view to list. 1, 2, 3. There it comes. So, I have no idea what the underlying difference is here, but this would make for a fascinating bug report to get lost inside Apple. Okay, so this is the basic idea of an observable object. It's the way that we can bridge all of our reference types, our imperative nature code, and everything into SwiftUI. And we do it with this @ObservedObject. Now, one of the things that Clay pointed out is that since, so we've got this observable object, so we got that object will change publisher, we get it for free. One of the things we also get for free with feed controller is if we describe our property as @published, then when we change the property inside the observable object, it will automatically send the will change for us, which is kind of cool. If we didn't have the published, we could just do this self.objectWillChange.send, and that's about it. But we don't need it, so there we go. So we're now fetching posts, and we're getting them to show up here. Now, you see, we're still got the hard-coded post information and everything. Now, let's go take a look at the post. And this is a post, right? So it's got a user ID, a photo URL, a caption, and a number of likes. Okay? And I did this specifically so that we could have more things to build off of. Just to get it working, I'm just straight up loading the image synchronously. And there are better ways we can do this because we've just got a URL. So really it'd be nice where the post loads, we know that something's going to be there because we've got the photo URL, the user ID, the caption, all that stuff. But it'd be nice if we had that little spinner, right, until the post has fully loaded. So what I'm going to do next is we're going to do this. And this is where we're going to see another thing with SwiftUI. I'm going to go back here to my feed view, and I'm going to change this from observed object to environment object. Okay? Now, there is this thing called the environment in SwiftUI. The environment is just kind of like a snapshot of the greater state surrounding the view. So if you want to know whether you're in light or dark mode, that's in the environment. You want to know what your accessibility size is, that's in the environment. Your horizontal and vertical size classes, these are also in the environment. But there are ways that you can put your own stuff in the environment, and one of them is with environment objects. So here, instead of, now, we don't want to do this. What we want to do is, when we construct a feed view, we want to say, hey, I just want to pass in the feed controller as an environment object. And I've got to do that here in my feed controller. Okay? So this is a modifier on all views where I can say everything inside this view gets this object in the environment. Okay? And I can look up this object based on its type. Okay? So I can only have one feed controller in the environment. Right? So when I declare over here in feed view, I declare this environment object, it knows which object to pull out based on this type. okay? But I can override it at different levels if I wanted. So I could have like a certain feed controller at the top level, but then as I drill down and look at other things, I could override the current feed controller with a different feed controller, right? As say maybe like for things below this, use this other feed controller. This is one of the ways in which we can do dependency injection in SwiftUI. Now, the other interesting thing here is that if I leave this line out and build, I'm going to crash, okay, like this. Because when it goes to construct the feed view, it's trying to look up in the environment for an object of type feed controller, and it's going to say, hey, no observable object of type feed controller was found, okay? And so this is like a way to kind of enforce that your dependencies are where they're supposed to be. The reason I'm moving feed controller to be an environment object is because I want to access it now at different points in the view hierarchy, and I just don't feel like passing it around in every single view initializer and having to declare, you know, let feed controller : feed controller at each level so I can pass it down the initializer chain. And so this way I can kind of just skip all of that. So now I can be way down here inside a post view, and I can say, hey, I've got this environment object called a feed controller. And now when it constructs the post view, it's going to automatically fill in that value from the environment for me. I think this is pretty cool. So what are we wanting to do? Here inside our feed view, we're wanting to load up a post, okay? And when we load up the post, by default, we've just kind of got like this V stack, right? And we need to load things out of we want to kind of like load up the contents of this post. So let's go over here. Let's also construct a post contents. And this will be have a post, an image, and a user. Okay? And we want a way to say, given this post, please load up everything about it so I can see it here in the feed, right? All right. So let's go to post view. The very first thing is that we don't want to start loading this post right away, right? We only want to do it maybe like when the view first shows up on screen. Okay? So what we can do is we can put a modifier on our view that says on appear execute some code. So when this view appears on the screen, execute this code. And I'm pretty sure that this takes into account like cells in a list that are off screen, and it only calls it when they appear. If we want to test this, we can just put a little print in here saying, you know, post, and then post dot user ID, or not post dot caption here. Oh, and I did this all off. Okay, and now when I run this, we'll see 5 things, and then as I scroll, we'll see more coming in. Okay? All right. So now let's start putting in some state, right? We need to know whether or not we've actually loaded, right? So let's just have a state called var is loading. We'll start it to true. And then we'll do like some conditional logic here. So we'll have a group, and inside the group we'll say if is loading, one thing. Otherwise, we'll show the other thing. So what do we want to have here? I don't know, maybe like spinner, okay? And now we need a way to have our post contents. Okay. And so here in our, instead of just like straight up hard coding this, we will just do post contents dot image. And we'll start with that. Okay, so now we actually need to load our post, right? Okay. Let's pull up our feed controller. So I'm going to come up here, environment object, feed controller. And I'm just doing this on the feed controller because it's a convenient place to do it. I'm going to say func load post completion. This is an escaping closure, and I will get a post contents back like this. Okay, and here I'm going to say, let's see, what do I need? I need the user and the image. Okay, so I will say user dot load fetch user with post dot user ID, user in, and then I will say image UI image contents photo URL. I'll force unwrap that because I'm lazy. And then let contents equals post contents with my post, image, and the user. And I will call my completion with the contents. Content for the URL. Okay. All right. So now there is a case where I might want to check to see if I've already loaded a post. So I could have like some caching here in the feed controller of like recently loaded posts so that I'm not reloading it every single time, right? But let's start with this and see what it looks like. So I'm going to come in here to post view, and instead of this print message, I'm going to say feed controller dot load post, and then the completion is self dot contents, post contents, contents. And I'm probably going to need some self dots. Self dot. Okay, let's try this and see how it works. Okay, so we load up some spinners, 2, 3, go. No.
Where do you say is loading false?
Yeah, you're never setting your is loading to false.
Thank you. Oh, okay. Now, that's a great point. Like, I really, and I don't technically need is loading at all. What I maybe should do instead is if post contents equals nil, and do it that way. And then I can just get rid of that. Because there's really only one piece of state here. Do I have post contents or not? Right? Okay, so we've got that. Now we've got our enough that we can start filling out like the post header. So here we'll need a user. Okay, and our user has a typo. User has a okay, just a second. Okay, now I'm going to do that so I can add that image here. Import. And here the self.image, UI image name. What do I call these? Profile ID. So when I come back here, I need to pass in the image. The text here is going to be the user dot name. I'll get rid of that because I don't care. All right, and I will force unwrap that because I live dangerously. And now I need to pass in my user, post contents dot user. Okay, so load up the feed, boom, 1, 2, 3, load these up. Okay, now I've actually got user photo, user name, user photo, user name, user photo, user name. And notice that those at the bottom are spinning, right? Because they hadn't loaded, they were on a pier, so it kind of got like progressive loading here. That's kind of cool, but if I scroll back up, those have been pulled off. And like I said, I can do a little bit better about caching this data and stuff, but looking pretty good, right? Okay, so I can do some other things now. Let's go down here with the post likes. Let number of likes int. And now I can pass in post contents dot post dot number of likes and post likes. And here I can say text number of likes equal like this. Now there is an issue here where if I just do 1, then I'm going to have some bad pluralization, right? Or am I? Will I have some bad pluralization here?
I was going to say yes.
I think with the way that SwiftUI works, I mean, I think it can take care of certain plurals for us. We'll take a look at this here in a minute. Okay, not a big, okay, 3 people like this, 10 people like this, okay, 1 people like this. There is a way where you can, so with SwiftUI, whenever it sees like a string literal here, it knows that this is going to be localizable text. So this would be a situation where I want to like pull this out and like put it in, like extract this into my strings file, and then use like the strings dict pluralization features of NS localized string and friends to take care of this for me. But anyway, more than I want to do right now. So we're doing pretty good. Any things we want to keep seeing? How about, I've got an idea. So we've got a controller for our feed. Let's create another controller. We're we're going to call this our account controller. Okay, and this is going to represent the currently logged in user. Okay, so what kind of object should this be? Should be an observable object. And we'll just have a publish var favorite posts. And this will be a set of post.id. Okay? So, what I want to do is when the app starts up, I want to create a account controller. And in fact, I can just do it right here. This is going to be an environment object on just my root view, right? So I could even just do the environment objects here, feed controller, and not even have to pass it into my content view. That's nice. Let's go get rid of this out of there. Keeps it simple, right? And good. So now, when I come down here into that post actions, for whether or not it should be favorited, I can just say, hey, I need the account controller, right? And now, instead of having like, oh, this will be cool. Okay. Nope. Okay. Well, let's start off with the post. Let me just put all that back. We need the post in here, right? Because we need the ID, right? So when we are here in our post view, we will need a post, and this will be our post. Okay. So let's get rid of that binding and that. So when we go into here, we'll need our environment object. Sure, let's do this. Our accounts, and this is our account controller. And so instead of doing like self.isFavorite, we're going to do self.account, and we'll go over back here and make a method that's like func toggle favorite post.id, and then we will also have a func isFavorite post.id, and this will return a bool. And these will just be convenience for favorite post.contains post ID. And here we will say if favorite post.contains, then favorite post.remove, else favorite post.insert. Right? And you could imagine us actually like saving this out to user defaults, or like sending off a network request to actually save the state of your favorites to your account. But we'll just keep it in memory for now. Okay, so our button action is going to be self.account.toggleFavorite post.id. And then here, instead of isFavorite, it will be account.isFavorite post.id. Questions about what I just did? Okay. Say what? I do have two cursors. Control. And I need. Let's delete that. Okay. So now what this means is that I will be able to favorite a post, scroll it off screen, which will cause it to be destroyed, and then scroll back to it, and it should come back with the same favoriting state, right? because we're now keeping that favoriting state outside of the post itself. All right, so I'll favorite just this first one because it's here. Boom, nice solid heart, fantastic. I will scroll off screen. Okay, now when I scroll back up, okay, it's loading again, right? And it's favorited still. Okay?
Should we clap?
Woo! And notice that when I'm back here in my post actions, I'm not having to say and change the state of the button and reload this part of the UI and stuff. Like all of that's getting taken care of for me because like before when I was talking about SwiftUI watching all of the states and using that to update or rebuild the views, it does that with observable object. It does that with environment object as well. There are other things that it'll watch, such as an environment value. So an environment object has to be a reference type. There are other kinds of environment values that are more like value types. And this would be like where your color scheme comes into play. So if I wanted the current color scheme, I would say environment and then pass in a key path. It's a little weird. Bar color scheme. And this is of type color scheme. And color scheme here is more or less an enum with light and dark values. So I can just know that this is going to be light and dark. I can even do things in like override specific subviews. So I can say, hey, for everything below this, color scheme dark. So everything inside that H stack will have the dark color scheme. I think that will more or less just invert colors. Yeah, so now they're like all kind of invisible because the primary foreground color when you're in dark mode is white, but it's now white on white and stuff. So you can do all sorts of fun stuff. Huh? So like if you wanted to implement in your app a toggle for like, do I want to follow the current system color scheme? Well, like in macOS, this sort of toggle. Where like, do I want it to be light mode, do I want it to be dark mode, or do I just kind of like want to follow the system appearance? That's really easy of just, do I want to override the environment's color scheme for part of my view hierarchy? And in this case, it would be like the root view in the entire view hierarchy, right? And then that overrides the color scheme for your entire app. What else? I guess one thing I want to show you is just kind of like how far you can go with this. So the past little while, I've been working on a Mac app with Paul Hudson and some other folks called Control Room. How many of you are familiar with the command line tool called SimCTL or SimKittle? Okay, so SimControl is basically a command line tool for controlling the simulator, and it allows you to do things like override parts of the status bar and take screenshots and manipulate movie recordings. And it's really cool, and Paul built a Mac app around it, and I've been working on it with him. And this app is built entirely in SwiftUI. So when I run it here, so it's fetching simulator list, and then boom, we get this nice little Mac app, right? So I've got a list of the simulators known to my system over here. I can select one, and that updates everything over here. I can like poke around in tab views, and I can say, all right, well, here's my simulator right here. I want it to have 1 bar of Wi-Fi. Oh, you know what? I don't have the Xcode 11 to wait for on this machine. So the status bar stuff doesn't entirely work. But I think I can change maybe the appearance. Maybe not. Yeah. But anyway, stuff I could do if I had my Xcodes all up to date. Maybe. Yeah, but you can like fake push notifications. So anyway, this is like the sort of app that you can build in SwiftUI. I just kind of like want to walk you through parts of it. So like this sidebar over here, it looks like an AppKit control called an NS outline view. Okay, but it's really over here, main windows sidebar. So we're doing a couple of these things. One, we've got our environment for just the preferences, and this is just like all of those little preferences you want to toggle in the app. And then a controller for the simulators. And again, this is an observed object. So here, our body is basically in this case it's a V stack because there's a list up here, and then a divider, and then this little H stack down here at the bottom. And so you can kind of look, there's this list up here at the top, the divider line, and then this H stack with that button and the search bar at the bottom. The list itself is this, okay? So we're going to go through all of our known platforms and just build out a section in the list. And building a section is, if there's no simulators in that section, it'll just be empty. Otherwise, it will be a section where the header is a text, and then we just for each the simulators in that section and create a little simulator sidebar view. And the simulator sidebar view is more or less an H stack with a couple of images, a text, and a spacer, right? And that's all of this. And like some of the things that I get for free now are like this section is collapsible, right? And that's free, right? Some other things that we do is, so there's that search field down at the bottom. We're binding that search field, where is it, right here, to the filter text, filter the simulator's text on our preferences. Our simulator's controller, when the preferences changes, it's just going to refilter its simulators. And refiltering the simulators is just going to store it back into this simulator's property, which by the way is published. So it's going to automatically trigger that object will change notification. So what this means is like I can just type down here for pro, and now like I've filtered the simulator list, right? Because that's firing off to preferences, which is triggering the controller, which is filtering, which is sending object will change, and like it's like super easy. And like click the X to make it go away, and it all comes back. For the main UI, the split layout view, it's just this thing called an H split view. So on the first thing is a sidebar view, and on the right side, if there's only one simulator selected, then we'll just show a control view for that selected simulator. Otherwise, we'll say select a simulator from the list, right? Because we can do multiple selections. We can do things like right-click and delete simulators. If I just right-click on one, then I get more options. I can like clone a simulator and just call it number 2. And now I've got another simulator here. Never mind, I don't want that. Delete it. Boom, goes away. And these under the hood, they're all just running these commands called, so it's running xcrun, like we're used to, sim control, and then just the list of arguments. And it's on Mac apps, you have the ability to shell out and run commands like that if you're not sandbox. And we just turn all of these into publishers. So we've got a publisher for like listing our current devices. We're going to execute a list command and say we want it in JSON. And just like get it back and parse the results, and it's easy. And so like this is the sort of neat app that you can build, and it's really straightforward. And honestly, like this is the fastest I've ever been able to build apps before, because it's just like describing like I need a list. Here are the things in the list, and it just makes it all for me, and it takes care of so much. Any questions? Keith?
So your split view right here,
Yep.
if you had made that just a horizontal view, how would that change?
Well, so an H-split view has this automatic divider here, and it gives me this automatic little thumb that I can use to drag things over. If I just used an H-stack instead, then I would just have like two views side by side.
It would be even size.
Yeah, and it'd be sized oddly. If you want to check this out, it's github.com/2straws. That's Paul Hudson /control room. Other questions? Yeah, Toby.
I think I figured out why your VStack and scroll view were not working.
Okay.
You need to set a frame on your scroll view and your VStack because it doesn't have a width. It was coming back at 0 width. At least in the new debugger it was. So I set a width and everything works.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
anyway,
Still feels like a bug.
it's a little odd.
Yeah.
Scroll view doesn't have an inherent width, and neither does VStack. It just does automatic cycling, which whatever it will fill.
But shouldn't it have been inferring the sizes off the frames of the texts?
I would have thought
There was a post on Stack Overflow that was saying if you have an empty, so your initial array was empty,
Yeah.
but if you did have something in there to begin with, then it could have inferred. But since it started off with nothing in it, it wasn't able to.
It wasn't able to decide, so it didn't know how to start.
Yeah. Okay.
But if it had something to begin with.
Yeah, the reason list works in an automatic width is always extreme width.
Right. It's always the proposed width.
Yeah.
Okay. Question?
I forgot what I was gonna ask. How is working in SwiftUI for Mac? Has it been a lot more difficult than doing it for iOS? I feel like there's less documentation around some of the.
I mean, if we look at some of this code, let's go over here to like the simulator UI. This particular screen, this is our system screen, system view. It's literally the exact same code that you would use on iOS. I want a form, and I want a group inside the form. It's just that, like on iOS, this would be a table view, like a grouped table view. And when I say like date picker, I would get a UI date picker instead of an NS date picker. I would get a UI button instead of an NS button. This is a picker that by default changes to a segmented control. Other things here, like the network view, playing around with like the network types and stuff. Here I'm just having to explicitly say pop-up button picker style, whereas like by default it would be like a segmented control. And so like if I were to move this over to Mac, I wouldn't be able to say pop-up button picker style, because that is Mac only. iOS, unavailable. So I'd have to pick a different picker style here, but it would just be like a UI picker view at that point. It's literally the same code. The only things that like really come up as different are like this H split view, kind of, but like we still have split views on iOS. I'm having a hard time coming up with stuff that's like unique to iOS or Mac, and I'm just like, I'm doing it.
Because like I was wondering, can you do like what's it called? MS layout effect view? What is it called?
Visual effect view?
Visual effect view.
So if you remember from last month, one of the things that we did was we created this UI view representable to like put our own custom UI view into SwiftUI, because SwiftUI does not have the spinner, the UI activity indicator view. if we wanted to use a UI visual effect view or an NS visual effect view, we would do the same thing. Host it into SwiftUI via a view representable like this, and then just use it like a SwiftUI view. Yeah.
So is that natively supporting dark mode right now, or if you want to?
This one?
Yeah.
Boom.
And did you have to do anything for that? Or did
No,
you just
none whatsoever. Okay, so the one thing that we did have to do is that we had to go and we had to make our icons for like the Wi-Fi and cell bars be template icons instead of just rendered icons, and that was it.
So template meaning that it'll substitute the copper thing for light or dark?
Template means that it renders based off like the current tint color, and the tint color is derived from the color scheme.
Let's say you did want to port this over for both platforms. Is there like some modifier that you'd have to put? Say if iOS, then do you use this, or if
At this point, if like control room, if I wanted that to be on iOS, I could, but it wouldn't do anything because there are no simulators on iOS, right? But if I had like some other app, well, I'm curious now.
Hey,
Yeah.
change your target. There you go. That's done. Don't throw it on there. That's great.
This isn't like the same thing as like truly building it as a Mac app. It's still building it as an iOS app, but running it in Catalyst. Yeah, checkbox. And I mean, it's getting something-ish by default, yeah. Stay after and we can like turn it into a Mac app. Because the main problem with turning it into a Mac app right now is the just like starting things up. Mac OS app. Okay. Gonna select all of this. And I'm gonna say these are also in the Mac target. And I need Utagram Mac. All of those to also be code. Over code. Copy. Okay, so I've got all my pictures now. You know what? I might need this one too. Copy that one down. Okay, app delegate. Close that. Let's delete content view because I've already got content view up here. But what I do need is this, right? So now instead of that, I do that. And let's go now to Utagram Mac. Build this. Okay. Oh, right, because I've got all like this UI kit, UI image stuff.
the way they talked about it in WWDC was they kept throwing this motto around of SwiftUI isn't code once, run anywhere. It's learn once, apply anywhere.
Yeah.
So it uses the same paradigms for every platform, but it's recommended that you would have like an iOS content view and a macOS content view, and to share models and share logic. But when you get up to the view layers, to break out and use these the compiler flags to to create platform-specific views.
That's actually some of the beauty of all of this, is there's so little code that's necessary that you can create some reusable components across both platforms.
Yeah, so
But when
like,
it comes to the overall
for-
layout, you're gonna want it to be different.
for the spinner, instead of having it be UI view representable, I have it be NS view representable, and here I'm actually looking at an NS, what is that? Is it a progress indicator? And this is now make NS view, update NS view. And I don't even need anything there. Spinner equals NS progress indicator. That spinner dot is indeterminate is true. And think style. Spinner dot style equals dot spinning. Spinner dot start animation. So like that would be something I changed, and then like all of the images. So it's so like I could probably finish this in maybe about 10 minutes and run it and get something reasonable.
Can I just add, you have to clean your environment twice a day?
Yeah.
Do you think that's something that got worse in SwiftUI, or?
No, I think that's an Xcode issue, not having to do a clean build. Ethan?
So, I'm getting the idea that you can create your app and you can add all these targets to watch the iPhone, Mac, and everything, all in one project. Is that true?
Yes, and like, to be clear, I could before. The thing about SwiftUI is that it enables me to build things faster, and in some ways I can sometimes even share stuff more easily. All right, we're just about out of time. Before we end,